Hello, everyone. This is Kripa Anand, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are exploring the deep behavioral science behind corporate execution and human performance. In 2026, as operational complexity, artificial intelligence, and competing marketplace priorities scale faster than leadership capacity, running an organization requires understanding exactly how teams operate under extreme stress. Joining us today is Tammy Arseneau, the founder and CEO of Cortical Consulting and Coaching. Tammy is an elite organizational effectiveness advisor with nearly 30 years of global executive human resources and transformation experience across Canada, the US, and New Zealand. Formerly the Vice President of Culture and Talent at Suncor Energy, she specializes in aligning leadership structures with behavioral insights to optimize team accountability. So, before further ado, let's welcome this very special guest. Tammy, welcome to the podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Kripa. I'm really happy to be here, especially on this topic. So thank you.
So am I. I'm looking forward to this conversation, Tammy, because uh, corporate environments today are moving faster than ever, right? Yet our baseline leadership development programs seem completely stuck in the past. So let's start the conversation by understanding why are leaders struggling to keep up with today's workplace complexity? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Kripa. It's a really great question. I think the complexity perhaps has always been there, but what is different, and you mentioned it, is the pace.
Yeah.
And it's going quickly, the world's moving. Leaders are struggling with doing more with less. We hear that all the time. We see that in corporate environments always, right? There's always reductions in talent, and the decision making that they have to deal with is not changing. So how do you deal with a changing economy, a changing world, political dynamics? There's so much that's hitting people. So I'm not sure as much that it's so it's the pace of change, and the leadership capacity just isn't keeping up necessarily. So not capability of the leader, but the capacity for all of us to process information, to deal with things, the volume of decision making that is hitting us is a real challenge.
Right. No, I completely agree with you, specifically with so much noise in the market as well, right? You
Yes.
open any social media platform, LinkedIn, Instagram, you feel like you're behind because there's just so much happening all around. But as you said, Tammy, acknowledging that today's rapid technological friction, it demands entirely new cognitive tools. It prevents your management tier from, freezing up when priorities collide as well. Great.
Yes.
Let's now explore the hidden operational costs of workplace ambiguity. So, from your extensive experience, Tammy, please go ahead and educate our listeners on how does workplace ambiguity impact the overall team performance as well.
Yeah, ambiguity is an interesting thing. And, you can look at it as the ambiguity tax in some ways in the organization. It's a hidden cost. But when we talk about complexity of the organization and then our capacity to deal with things, one of the things that I've learned about as I've explored a lot of things within neuroscience is that our brains are prediction detection machines. We want to solve things. We want to understand what's coming. So when we talk about complexity, inherently uncertainty is part of that.
Right.
How do I answer this question? What's going on? And
it's a natural thing to feel that way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the more that we can understand what is within our control, because leaders, I've tried it already, saying, hey, how can we do less? Right? Less priorities, so less ambiguity, and bring as much clarity as we can. So that's a bit of a challenge. We can't always add more people to deal with that. So we're struggling within that. So what can we do? Because our brain is trying to predict the future. It doesn't like ambiguity. And with ambiguity, we're trying to solve that, and we make stories up. So in fact, it takes a lot of time and energy for individuals and then teams. And we start to make things up. We start to fill the gaps of that uncertainty. So what's interesting in this ambiguity tax is the thing that is within our control as leaders is if we could bring more clarity to the direction, and maybe more discerning with all that information coming at us. How do you prioritize what's real and what's not, what's relevant today, and getting really good at minimizing that from a direction, being clear on the direction. We work a lot with organizations, and it sounds simple, but it's so important when you understand also the brain science.
Right.
How do you become clear on people's roles and accountabilities? Because that's all we want to do every day is show up and say, what's my job today? What's important? Am I delivering value? Am I important? And the more that we can focus on that, minimize the ambiguity that's there for people on a day-to-day basis or over the long term, I think that really helps.
Wow, that's beautifully articulated. And also, Tammy, I think we can draw up very interesting parallels here from like with human brain versus the AI brain. Because even with AI, if you're not providing the facts, it starts hallucinating and it starts assuming
Absolutely.
things, right? And
Yes.
definitive is the case with the human brain. If you don't find answers, it feels threatened. So,
It fills the gap.
exactly. Yes. With any information that, might come, whether
Yeah.
it be true or not.
Yeah.
So, recognizing that the human brain naturally treats workplace ambiguity as a threat response, it
Yes.
allows leaders to proactively establish rigid role clarity before assumptions destroy collaboration. So, thank you so much for shedding
Yeah.
some light on that. Now, let's look at applying high performance behavioral strategies to business. So,
Mhm.
how exactly, Tammy, does stress affect communication and decision making in teams? Because it also affects the timeliness of when that decision is being made, right? And that might affect the business decision. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think stress is one of those fascinating things that impact us because we show up every day and we have a plan. Usually we come in and we're pretty good. And then during the day, whether it's that ambiguity or complex problem, stress starts to hit us. And sometimes you don't even recognize it's happening to you. So it creeps up. And then our behaviors shift.
Right.
And what I've learned, we do some work here in Calgary with the University of Calgary, and it's called the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. And we've been doing some work with Dr. Matthew Hill, and he's a stress neurobiologist. And in fact, we ran a leadership summit last October.
Wow.
And we explored the intersection of performance and stress. So I'm not a neuroscientist, he is, but what I've learned through their work and through Dr. Hill's work is that when we're under stress and know that stress, as I understand it, is also very personal, right? It's our biology, and no two biologies are the same. So it's a very personal response. But what tends to happen for all of us, or most of us, is that our thinking and it narrows, right? That threat response gets us to narrow. We stop exploring options. We actually become more certain because we look for certainty. So we become more certain about the response or the decision that we have to make. So stress will flood us with emotions. It narrows our thinking. So that is very risky if you're a leader at some point. So sometimes stress is good. And
Right.
there's always this range of stress. But when stress is prolonged and it's acute in that moment, I think it's really important to make sure that we don't make big impactful decisions when we're under stress and we're not thinking about all the options. So what I've learned is, wow, I wish I knew that. I wish I knew that as a leader. Like, I've been working in this space for 30 years and even as a mom, right? Like understanding the stress responses, maybe I would have made very different decisions. But if I don't know that, and that's why we try to bring that to organizations to say it's not necessarily bad, it's a human response, and that's okay. But recognize it first. Make sure that you take some time outside those stressors. Invite input and feedback because when we're under stress, we don't want to hear from anybody typically, right? But taking the time after to understand the stressors, think about, are these really all the options that are available, and make big decisions when stress isn't impacting your thinking.
Wow, that was so reassuring and so helpful, Tammy. Thank you so much for that. Building on what you've said, I'd now like to give a special message to all of our listeners, specifically to all the corporate executives, HR directors, and scaling founders who are listening and watching this. In 2026, you cannot expect elite output from an emotionally exhausted workforce.
Mhm.
Tammy and her strategic advisory team at Cortical Consulting and Coaching are completely revolutionizing how organizations navigate large scale change by pioneering their acclaimed, sold out leadership at the speed of Science Summit at the BMO Center. So, bringing together top enterprise operators alongside researchers, as you mentioned, from the Hotchkiss Brain Institute and iconic leaders from Colonel Chris Hatfield, Cortical builds comprehensive operational blueprints that integrate system design with human biology. It's a beautiful combination of getting these two things together. So, if you are ready to stop treating change management as a generic checklist and start unlocking true system performance, visit corticalconsulting.com today. Transform your leadership pipeline from the inside out. Now, coming back to you, Tammy, we talked about integrating practical human performance metrics directly into our corporate strategy, right? It also ensures that our executives maintain sharp, decisive, right, all the time. Now, let's explore why most companies struggle with change management. So, from your extensive experience, you've talked to so many different organizations and people. Why exactly do you think companies, go the other way? What do they get wrong about change management?
Yeah, I want to answer that question, Kripa, but I also want to go on what you just said, because you had mentioned the summit and why we had Colonel Chris Hadfield as an astronaut
Yes,
and
go ahead.
elite athletes. So we had Olympians also attend. So I just want to address that a little bit with interesting executives and neuroscientists together. So what was that? It almost felt like a joke, a neuroscientist, an athlete, and an astronaut walk into a bar. But what we really found, what was interesting, is that in like military or Navy SEALs or in elite sports, they don't separate your mental performance, your brain performance, and your body performance. It's really well connected, and they know
Right.
they can't be successful without the other one. So bringing that into business is not, so it's not a new idea. It's not a novel idea. It's just the application into business is one thing. So I just wanted to mention that
Mm-hmm.
perspective on why we brought them all together and what we learned
Well,
from a
thank you so much for
change.
that. That gives a
Yeah,
lot of context for
yeah,
our listeners as well, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then to answer directly from a change management, so you can imagine anything that changes in our life, and we've all experienced it on a personal level, something changes and you feel that reaction,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes there's a like, what does this mean for me? What am I going to do? How do I figure this out? And
Mm.
it depends what assumptions you bring to that conversation, your history. So your brain's trying to figure out and predict the future of this change and what does it mean? But it's also relying on past experiences and histories, which can be helpful and sometimes unhelpful. But I think the way organizations and leaders have typically, in my experience, approached change is not fully understanding. Like, we look at resistance, like, how do we manage resistance? And we look at it as if it's the enemy, and really it's just a clue. It's just an
Mm-hmm.
understanding. It's a normal human reaction that if we listen to what the resistance is really telling us, what's behind that is probably a question. And if we
Right.
can answer the questions that people have about, well, what does this change mean for the company? What does it mean for me? And if we can help answer those questions and not see it and not double down, because I think when
Mm-hmm.
there's resistance and you perceive it that way as a threat, as a leader, what happens? We talked about the stress. You double down and you want to tell them now at this point, right? You start to narrow the focus and double down on what it is. So I think we just need to be a little bit more open on what it is. What are their questions?
Mm-hmm.
What's really important for us to learn as we navigate this change? And we can't always answer everything, but people just want to be heard and their point of view considered, whether you do it or not.
Yeah.
I think they just want to be heard and considered. And I realize, as I worked at Suncor, as you mentioned, that's 13,000 people. So it's hard to, consider
Mm-hmm.
everybody's opinion. But I think that is the role of leaders, to stop, manage their own reaction to it, understand that people are going to go through it and it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't have to answer every question, but at least normalize it and answer the questions. Communication is such a big part, but the time and the capacity that people have to understand what's happening. And then I think the other part of it is, and think about it, when you're driving to work, it's almost automatic,
Mm-hmm.
or where you're going, so it becomes automatic. And that's what happens. We form habits. And at work, we form habits on how we do work. All of a sudden, you're asking somebody perhaps to change completely the way they're working. That, after you've answered those questions,
Mm-hmm.
changing that habit or the routine they've established for themselves just
Right.
takes time. So I think
Definitely.
it's
I
just having a little
think,
bit more patience, awareness that these are human responses and we can
yes.
work with them. We can make change happen.
That is indeed, a great reminder, your entire answer, that before being an employee or a corporate executive or literally anything, you are a human first, right? So if
Yes,
you apply all these principles in your life as a person, you will
yes,
automatically apply that in the business persona as well. Um,
yes. We often
Beautiful.
say that change happens at the human level in organizations, right? The team
Exactly.
dynamics, the
Right.
organizational systems, how you show up every day, and that's where we operate.
And you know what, Tammy? I think with AI now coming into the picture, people are
Yes,
realizing the importance of human element more than, anything else as well.
yes,
So it's a beautiful
yes,
realization that finally is happening. And
yes. Finally
what
happening
you
in business.
Exactly, yes. And what you said about, treating corporate readiness as a continuous cultural alignment process rather than, a final training mandate, it drastically minimizes your post-launch adoption risks as well. So thank you so much for
Absolutely.
that. Finally, let's look at creating practical clarity across fast moving teams.
Mhm.
So, let's now talk about the solution. So, what do you recommend? What practical steps can leaders take today to improve team clarity and decision making?
Yeah, I think for leaders specifically, whatever, or entrepreneurs, whatever you can be clear about. And because that brings some certainty. If you're not clear, I think people are okay and they probably prefer the authenticity that I don't know, but I'll find out. There's also something in that doesn't make them panic or try to solve it for themselves. Let's come back to that. We'll figure it out together. So I think being clear as you can, but being authentic in that clarity. Don't create clarity that's untrue, because then you'll create some
Of
mistrust
course.
along the way. Um,
Right.
I think just spending more.
Definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely, I think what you said, installing explicit, visible accountability frameworks across your workflows, I think it um, cuts through communication clutter and accelerates your operational velocity.
Yeah,
So all these points that you've mentioned in this conversation today, I think if leaders take note of that and apply that, automatically everyone in the organization will be able to, follow that.
absolutely.
I'm loving this conversation today, Tammy, and definitely we'd love for you to be back, hopefully for an in-person episode that we do the next with you. But for today, before we let you go, if there's one final piece of advice that you have for our listeners today, specifically for leaders who are overwhelmed by organizational complexity, who don't know where to take that first leap of faith or hope from, if you could whisper one thing into their ears, what would you say and why?
I think self-awareness is huge. I think you need to start with yourself, right? We always talk with the plane, put your mask on first. It's still true. I think if we can understand our own reactions and become more aware,
Mm-hmm.
and then if we can go in and understand that other people are going through that as well, and then setting some priorities and working with people about bringing clarity. What are they uncertain of? So understanding your own reaction, and then helping in maybe small ways, helping people understand their priorities or their accountabilities or what decisions just need to be made today. We don't have to solve everything. So
Right.
start small.
That is indeed a spectacular reminder that your technology and strategy, it means nothing if you don't optimize the human operating system first. Tammy, thank you so much
Absolutely.
for joining us today. It was such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was Tammy Arseneau from Cortical Consulting and Coaching, a masterclass in bridging the gap between organizational complexity and leadership capability, utilizing behavioral insights to optimize decisions and understanding the true business case for human performance in 2026. To all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning into the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more such resources. To learn more about how we are supporting the ecosystem, please visit the Canadian SME Small Business Foundation at smbfoundation.ca. And lastly, a very special thank you to our partners, UPS, our shipping partner, and ADP, our HR partner, for their ongoing commitment to empowering SMBs across Canada. I'll see you all in the next episode. Kripa Anand signing off.